Larry, I don't know how many times back in 89 and 90, Bill Schoening said your name, driving in a run, making an error, something like that.
Well, hopefully it was calling me crossing the plate or knocking one in instead of letting one in. But excited about this interview today. Bill's been a friend for a long time. I've followed his career success with the Spurs and just really excited to have him on today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you guys. And I do remember David Lowery as a player, Mike. And the thing I remember most about David is his versatility. He could play several different positions. They could plug him in pretty much anywhere. Coach Gus used him like a utility player. And as I've mentioned before, to me, David Lowery is the poor man's David Tollefson.
I'm sending this tape to Tolly. He'll love that.
Tolly says thank you.
Oh, you got it.
My. Yeah, you were the voice of the Longhorns for so long, and that's when I first got to know you. It was back in those days. You had such a run then, and how memorable was that for you?
Wow, it was an awesome 12 years. I always say 36 seasons, 12 football, 12 basketball, 12 baseball. That's how long I was around. But a lot of memories. I mean, you just go back and the different sports and different coaches. The baseball, since we're with David Lowery now, was really fun. I got to the College World Series, I think, 3 times. And I remember the star players like Calvin Murray and Kirk Dressendorfer and Brooks Kieschnick, of course. But some of the role players like David Lowery, very important. And one of the things that Coach Gus did, I think, was really piece the teams together where everybody had their roles. David Lowery didn't try to hit home runs. He did what he did. And I think that kind of made it a real successful program. And, of course, the pitching was great, too. In fact, I just wrote this book, and I tell a story about Bo Hale. Now, Bo Hale was after you. That came in 2000.
Bo Hale and I grew up about 10 miles from each other, and he's 10 years younger than me. But we walked into Omaha real quick. I don't mean to jump on your story, Bill, but we walked into Omaha I 2000. One of the last times we've been there, blah, blah, blah. And Bo and I are together. We walk in a bar, and I asked the bartender, I said, we both played at Omaha. Who played? He goes, one of us played in 2000. The other one was in 89. And the guy looks right at me and goes, oh, well, you are definitely 2000. Even though Bo's 10 years younger, he looks 10 years older. So, he's just got that older look about him. So I give Bo a hard time about that.
Well, David, the first no-hitter in Big 12 conference history was thrown by Bo Hale. And it was a no-hitter against Sam Houston State. And he did not even allow a ball to be hit into the outfield. He had, I believe, 13 strikeouts in that game. There were 13 groundouts and a pop-up. And I remember that because Sam Houston State is where I worked for 6 years. I was the play-by-play guy at Sam Houston State. And before the game, their legendary coach, John Skeeters, asked me if I would give a little pep talk to the guys and talk to them down the right field line before the game. So I went down, just told them a few stories about some previous Sam Houston teams that had some success. And some sex, as a matter of fact, in Austin. I think it was
really
just success. That was no pun intended there. But anyway, I talked to the guys, and they went out and got no hit by Bo Hale. So the next night, Rick Barnes, the basketball coach at Texas at the time, I was doing a statewide radio show. He said, I'm not allowing my players to talk to you. I said, why? He said, anyone who gave an inspirational speech to a team that couldn't hit the ball out of the infield and got a base hit, I'm not going to have you talk to my team at all. So the players are off limits. So that was my inspirational speech. I gave a nice, rousing 3-minute speech to a team that couldn't get a hit.
That's funny. He's basically saying stick to radio, not inspirational.
Right.
Speeches.
Exactly. Don't go down that right field line.
Exactly. Where were you before Sam Houston? Take us back. You've written the book. It's one of the big reasons we got you on. I want to hear more about the book. But where were you before Sam Houston? Part of your journey in your sports, development as a broadcaster.
I grew up in Philadelphia. Yeah, I knew I wanted to do it at a young age, David. So at the age of 10, I wanted to be a play-by-play guy. So I kind of worked toward that. And I got my first job in radio at the age of 20. I went to a broadcasting school. I didn't make it through college. I wasn't smart enough. So I went to broadcaster school and got a job right away in a little town called Pana, Illinois. I was there for a year. Not too much sports there. It was mostly news, but I was trying to get my feet wet in play-by-play. And then there was a job opportunity in West Texas, in La Mesa, Texas, about 60 miles south of Lubbock. And the station there was real committed to sports, KPET. So we did high school football, basketball, baseball, We did little dribblers, Babe Ruth. We did everything we possibly could. But long story short, 3 years at that station, I did a ton of games, and I felt good enough and experienced enough to move up. So my next opportunity came at Sam Houston State in Huntsville, where I was for 6 years. Most people, when you tell them they're in Huntsville for 6 years, what did they get you for? But I was not in the prison for 6 years. I was outside the prison. Although I did cover the prison system. I had to cover, the prison overcrowding.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to some of that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Best one-on-one interview ever. Henry Lee Lucas, you're something.
Well, I did. Okay. Well, Henry Lee Lucas was a pretty well-known serial killer. And it was a slow news day there in Huntsville. So I called Charlie Brown, and believe it or not, they allowed death row inmates to have an interview once a week on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That was a death row interview day. And nobody particularly wanted to go out there and talk to the inmates, but it was a slow news day. So I asked for Henry Lee Lucas, and it cost me $1.50 because I had to get him a pack of cigarettes and an orange soda, I remember. So I went in there, and it was a meandering, wandering interview. Made no sense. He talked about killing his grandmother. Then the next sentence, he quoted Corinthians or something out of the New Testament. So it was really a 10-minute waste of time, I thought. And I listened to it on the back of the station. I said, maybe I could salvage a story or two out of this. It was also a slow news day in Texas AP up in Dallas. So they needed a story. So I pieced together about 5 little short snippets around my Henry Lee Lucas interview. And sure enough, about a week later, I got a check in the mail for $50. So when you count the $150 that I shelled out for the cigarettes and the orange soda for Henry Lee, I made $48.50 on that deal.
It's amazing.
It's a good profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've interviewed so many coaches, especially and players through the years, but do any stick out as being incredible interviews or really bad interviews?
Wow. Some of them, I couldn't even make air with some of them. I had to do some editing. I remember interviewing Rick Majerus. You guys will remember Rick Majerus, the basketball coach at the University of Utah. When I was the voice of the Longhorns, Texas played at Utah. And Utah was really good back then. They had Andre Miller and Michael Doliak, and I think Keith Van Horn might have been on that team. And I'm interviewing Majerus before the game on an old cassette recorder. And I said, I understand that you go back quite a ways with Coach Penders. He said, well, I remember Penders when he was coaching that Catholic school in New York, Fordham. And I know for a fact that the Catholic priest at the end of the bench was getting more action than Penders was. So I said, well, I guess I'm gonna have to do some. I guess I'm gonna have to do some editing on this interview. So that never did make the airwaves.
Wow!
Edited that part out. Yeah.
What's one of the more exciting calls? We know you called Ricky Williams when he broke the NCAA rushing record. Your time with the Spurs, even Sam Houston. What's some of your 2 or 3 biggest calls, or you feel like most exciting calls you've had in your career?
Well, one would be 4th and Inches, the first Big 12 championship game in St. Louis. The Longhorns were big underdogs against Nebraska. Texas faced a 4th and Inches at their own 29-yard line. I remember Craig Way saying they're just going to try to draw them off sides, and I thought the same thing. But they went ahead and ran the play, roll left, one of the famous plays in UT history, as Derek Lewis was downfield wide open for a 62-yard gain. And I remember saying on the air, John Makovic rolling the dice and picking up 62 yards. And then Craig chiming in, that might be the gutsiest call of Makovic's coaching career. The next play, Priest Holmes goes in for a 10-yard run, and the Longhorns secured one of the biggest ups in Big 12 history.
You had a lot of great calls through the years. You were there for Ricky Williams, and you've done so many with the Spurs.
Yeah, 4 championships, guys. So, and each of those was memorable in their own way. My favorite was 14 because there was heartbreak in 13. They had a 3 games to 2 lead in game 6. They had a 5-point lead with 28 seconds left. They had the championship in their grasp, and they let it get away. Ray Allen hit a corner 3. They won in overtime. Then they won in game 7, which was a real close game. Tim Duncan missed a tip in game 7 that would have tied the game with 42 seconds left. So it was a heartbreaking loss. And they ran it back the same way. They kept the same exact team together, and they beat the same team in the finals, and they beat them convincingly. That was LeBron James in Miami, 4-1. They won that series by an average of 14 points per game, and they shot 54% from the field. So it was a dominant performance to come back and beat a team that had broken their heart the year before. That's probably the most satisfying call and win that I remember with the Spurs, even though there were 4 championships. So and a lot of wins. They went through a period, guys, 18 consecutive years where they won at least 50 games every year. And that kind of consistency really was unheard of. The Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson had won 12 years in a row, winning 50 games, but never 18. So that was a pretty remarkable run there by the Spurs.
Yeah. I remember the day that you told us that you were going to get that Spurs job. How strange of a time was that for you, going from the man with the Longhorns to the man with the Spurs and driving so much? Because you stayed here in the Austin area, but making that commute to San Antonio all the time.
Yeah, it was kind of a strange time, Mike, because I really wasn't looking for another gig. I was very happy at the University of Texas. I was doing football, basketball, baseball, the talk show with Craig, and things were going very well. But they made me an offer that I basically couldn't refuse, and I have enjoyed it now for 21 years. And I kind of knew that they were going to be good. Tim Duncan was just entering his prime. They had just drafted Tony Parker. We didn't know much about Tony at the time, but it's been a great run. But that first year, I still did Longhorn football. And so that was kind of crazy because I was, catching commercial flights from, Columbia, Missouri to Milwaukee and just running all over the country for that period of time. I remember doing a football game at Missouri in Columbia, and it was the 01 season, obviously. And they had two outside linebackers. One was named Duncan and one was named Robinson. And I said, wait a minute, I'm getting a little confused here. I got a Duncan and Robinson on the other team, and now I got a Duncan and Robinson on this team.
Wow.
And ironically enough, there's now a guard in the NBA with the Miami Heat named Duncan Robinson. So I interviewed him before a game one time, and I said, you should really get a picture with Tim and David. And he goes, can I do that? Is there a place? Can I figure out a way to do it? And that's his goal in life, is to get a picture. I don't think he's got it yet, but Duncan Robinson wants a picture with Tim and David, so we can have all the Duncans and all the Robinsons together. Yeah.
That's good. Tell us about the book and what was the inspiration for it? How did it come back about? Is it something that you always wanted to do? I mean, how did that come about, creating the book or writing the book?
Well, David, I've had such a long run. I've been doing this play-by-play thing for 43 years now. But the thing that happened was COVID happened. And when COVID happened, the games stopped. I had a backup plan. I was going to do some baseball for Texas State, but college baseball ended the day after the NBA ended. So I had no games to call. So I had thought about writing a book when I finished my career, but I guess it came a little earlier because I had nothing to do. So I sat down at the computer and started writing. I had no idea how long I would write, how many stories I would include, what stories I would include. I tried to get organized and my thoughts, and I just kept writing. And the end result is a 312-page book, or as my publisher says, a lot of BS.
And some of your favorite stories in there? Kind of show the listeners.
There are a ton of them, David. I go all the way from my childhood. My earliest childhood memory was the day that John F. Kennedy got shot and killed in Dallas. Wow. I was with my mom. My mom was Irish Catholic, and we had a picture of John F. Kennedy next to Pope Paul VI in our living room. So you can imagine how devastating my mom was for her when the president got shot. So I remember that day very well because the cartoons wouldn't come on. They were preempting the cartoon coverage. I was a 5-year-old kid. I wanted to watch Casper the Friendly Ghost, but Casper never came on because the execution coverage or the assassination coverage rather. And I kept asking my mom when the cartoons would come on, and she finally said, they won't come on today because this is history. So that first story in the book that's my earliest recollection. But it was all through my childhood and my desire to be a play-by-play guy. Playing baseball, I was a good high school player. I got MVP my senior year. David Lowery, you didn't know that, but and it's so funny because years later,
because I followed you on Facebook. I know that because Bill's on Facebook with all his 70s garb. He's got the big league flow. He's always had the big league mustache. And you got a mustache made for television. How you ended up in radio, I don't know. But you got that big league
I have
mustache.
no idea. These looks are wasted on radio, guys. It's unbelievable. But I play ball. I love baseball. The white shoes back in the day, so we were doing our inner Shirley Finley Oakland A's look, the jean tennis Raleigh Fingers. Right. I never had the Raleigh Fingers mustache. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. And then it goes through my years doing Sam Houston State. There's some great small market stories in Lamesa. There was one game where you guys might not remember what a party line was, but we ordered a phone line to broadcast the game from Sweetwater, Texas, and it was a party line. I didn't know. I guess that the boss was trying to save some money, But in the middle of the second quarter, I'm describing a 3rd down and 8 pass to the sideline, and all of a sudden, this lady gets on the line because it's a party line, and she picks up her phone at home, and she's got the radio broadcast in her phone, and we have her on the air now. I want to call Agnes. I want to call. It's 3rd down and 8 from the Sweetwater 42-yard line. I want to call Agnes. Get off my phone. So I pitch a break. We'll be right back. This is Golden Tornado Football on KPET Lamesa. I want to call Agnes. So I told the board op back on the stage, disconnect. Let's try to reestablish the line. So that worked. We got rid of the lady looking for Agnes. All we missed was a 4th down. Got back on the air in time. But now every time I'm doing a game and I hear any kind of a click, I'm expecting a lady on the phone looking for her sister Agnes.
That's pretty good.
That's good. That is good. How did you narrow down? Because I know you and I know how many stories you have. How did you narrow down to the stories that you used?
Well, I tried to get to the stories that I didn't offend anybody, which was very, very difficult, Mike, because as you know, no, I'm just kidding. There probably are a few I could have offended some people. But I tried to stories were uplifting. For instance, there's some stories about my work with the prison ministry, Kairos. So they're not all the stories are funny. Some of them are pretty dark. In fact, my time in the prisons when I went to visit these guys, I got cookie assignment duty one day, which means I had to go into the not just the yard but into the cell block and deliver these cookies, and it was not pleasant. It was a very dark place. It was very hot. I saw inmates in these cramped cells take water out of their toilets and put it on the floor and lie on the floor to cool off. It was really kind of an eye-opening experience for me. So there's some dark stories in there too, but most of the stories are uplifting and fun about broadcasting, and there's stories about the guys I've worked with too. Keith Moreland, there's a couple of great Keith Moreland stories in there. Of course, Craig Way, PJ Carlissimo, who, of course, longtime head coach and assistant coach in the NBA, now an analyst for ESPN. So some of these guys are real characters, and I just enjoyed sharing those stories.
Carlissimo, he made it to Monday night, didn't he? When he was at Seton Hall, didn't they play in the finals one year?
They lost a heartbreaker to the University of Michigan, and that really kind of put him on the map. That put Seton Hall on the map, a small little Catholic school in South Orange, New Jersey, getting all the way to the finals before they lost to Michigan. And I believe that was the 89-90 season. And then, of course, he got some NBA jobs out of that, Golden State and Portland. He became an assistant for the Spurs. That's how I got to know him so well. And if you ever go to an Italian restaurant anywhere in the country, guys, even though you guys might not know him personally, just tell them PJ Carlissimo sent you.
I'm going to tell Schoening. Schoening told me PJ said we could come eat here. That's what I'll tell you.
And you know what they'll do too, David? They'll get you a table away from the window just in case of a drive-by. You just never know when that's going to happen. So you want to make sure you're away from the window in case you have any mob ties. Not that PJ's got any, but that's the way it works.
Hey, also from following you on Facebook, I've noticed you're kind of going back to your roots a little bit, doing a little bit of college baseball. Tell us about that, in the most recent past. You've been doing a little bit this season.
I've had a little more time this year, David, because we're not traveling. We haven't traveled. The broadcasters been talking about since COVID. So the road games are broadcast from San Antonio. We're doing it in a studio right now, iHeart Studios. So therefore, I'm in Austin a lot more, and I have more off days. I'm not in Portland or New York or wherever the team is. So therefore, I've had some off days. And Brant Freeman from Texas State and my son Carl, who's been doing some UTSA, they've asked me if I would pinch hit and on occasion do some games. So this spring, I'm going to have the chance to do about 20 games. I've already done about 8 or 9, and I've really enjoyed it. I really miss college baseball. That was one of the things I knew that I would miss when I took the Spurs job, is missing the football and the baseball. And it's really been good to get back. UTSA has already, I think they're 5-0 against ranked teams this year. They had a big win against Stanford earlier this year. Texas State's also been very competitive this season.
No, Texas State's legit. They're ranked top number 10 right this week. They're a top 10 program. They really are playing good baseball.
Yeah, and they got a nice facility there. Yeah.
You mentioned your son Carl. You have to be proud as a dad, not only what he's done, but following in your footsteps in so many ways.
Yeah, he's a really good kid, too. That's what I really like about him. He's not a kid anymore. He's 30 years old, but he's worked his way up, and he's doing a lot of different things. It's not just play-by-play. He's doing a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. He's really into the technology, a lot more than his old man is, that's for sure. And I think that he's got a bright future. He's doing some stuff, as I mentioned, for UTSA. He's done the Austin Spurs now for about 5 years, which is the Spurs G League team. He goes over to Cedar Park and calls those games. Ironically enough, I live in Austin, and I'm doing the games in San Antonio. He lives in San Antonio, and he's doing the games up in Cedar Park. So we just got to honk at each other in New Braunfels. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Okay.
The Schoening family may need to work on logistics. If you guys go into business after broadcasting, you may want to work on logistical.
That's right. Maybe I should do some games down there. Yeah.
Maybe major in geography.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, do you remember this? Because I can't remember if it was in the fall or the spring, and you invited me over to your house, and I think we had an Italian dinner, and that's when. And Carl, he was real small. He was real young. In fact, you gave me a book, and something I meant to bring it. It was on the Great Shootout, and we had dinner that night, and your wife cooked, and it was lovely. And I wasn't sure, like, what, because I think I'd just gotten there. I think it might have been in the fall. He said, "Hey, David, I want to get to know you, blah, blah, blah. Come over to the house." But I always do remember that about you. And I appreciate that because you're a small town guy, or I was a small town guy coming to a big place, and you and your wife invited me over. And Carl was probably this high. I mean, he wasn't really old at all.
Yeah, I remember. I'm not sure if was Kieschnick with you that night. I know Kieschnick came over one night.
Kieschnick was after me, Bill. You're making me feel like one of Wilt Chamberlain's mistresses right here. I can't believe how many people did you have over to the house? I mean, I thought I was pretty special.
And looking back on it, I'm sure I was violating NCAA rules back then, right?
I was about to say, I think the statute of limitations. You were NIL before the NIL.
That's right. But I'm sure a free lasagna dinner probably was a violation. It's so funny, when the Austin Ice Bats came to town, I felt bad. Those guys were all from out of town. They were from Western Canada, and we had some of those guys over too. And their biggest fear was me not having beer. Now, I'm not a beer drinker, but I told them, I'm going to have you over. I got Labatt's and Molson's, some Canadian beers for these Canucks. And I told them, every one of them, "Hey, look, man, I'm going to have beer. And because I don't drink it, I'll have it for you." Every one of them came with a 6-pack just in case I didn't have the beer. That's like, for a hockey player, their biggest fear in life is not getting beat up, because they do that every night. It's running out of beer. That's the biggest fear.
I played in Winnipeg a year and a half. They love their Labatt's and they love their Molsons. They really do.
Yes, sir.
They really do.
Bill, you mentioned the Ice Bats. Remember, we televised the very first hockey game in Austin, and you were the play-by-play guy.
It's a highlight in my career. I talk about it in the book, Mike, because Blaine Stoughton was the owner of the Ice Bats. And we had a regular weekly show on the Zone to kind of familiarize people with hockey. A lot of people didn't know much about hockey. I grew up in Philadelphia, and the Flyers had won the Stanley Cup when I was in high school, so I knew the sport pretty well. And then out of the blue, he says, "Hey, Bill, what about you doing the play-by-play of the game? Hey. So I said, "I'll do the game," and I would have done it for $100, I promise. And he goes, "Well, I did a game in Cincinnati last year. I think we paid the guy $500. I said, "Tell you what, I know your box seats on the glass are going for $25. Give me $400 and give me 4 seats on the glass." So I got my family down on the glass. They had never seen a hockey game before, and it was a real hoot. And KVU did a great job, because I'm sure you guys didn't do a lot of live events, and I thought KVU did a great job. Steve Atkinson and I think Kenny Kaplan was probably on camera or helping produce, and Mike Barnes
on camera. David Johnson.
Didn't even. David Johnson. I think Judy Maggio might have even been there. I'm not sure if you threw her on camera or not.
She dropped the puck at mid-ice. Yeah.
She dropped the puck.
You were like the sideline guy, weren't you, Mike?
I was a sideline person, if you want to call it sidelines in hockey. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the blue line guy. He was breaking up the fights.
That's pretty good. Hey, and speaking of that, because you stayed mostly in radio, but you were telling us before the show started a little bit about Ron Franklin, Mr. Franklin, who just passed. Great announcer for ESPN. But Ron had started in radio and then made that transition to TV. And he said he gave you a 1-sentence piece of advice one time about making that transition when you do TV.
Yeah, if you ever make the transition from radio to TV, Ron Franklin said, you got to learn how to shut the hell up. And that, he was right, So I've only done a couple of TV games, but it's very hard for a radio guy to shut up. So because we're so used to talking and describing the action, obviously in TV, right. the action speaks for itself. So you're really more or less complimenting the color guy and setting him up the best you can. I did a TV game just 2 weeks ago at Texas State. with Coastal Carolina, and Ty Harrington was my analyst. So I tried to set him up, and man, that guy knows more baseball than I'll ever know. And so it was easy to set up Ty, and it was great to work with him because I've known him for 33 years. Getting a chance to work with him was a lot of fun.
And how did you do? How would you rate yourself as far as shutting up or cutting back? We're making fun, having fun with it, but cutting back, how did you think you did with the TV?
It's a work in progress, David. It's a work in progress. I talk too much. I yap. That's what I do. So I had to learn how to kind of, I don't have to describe a ground ball to second base. If you're watching the game, you can see that it's a ground ball to second base. All I got to do is say the second baseman's name. And so the next time I do a game, I'll be better on TV because I'm just, 43 years in radio, old habits die hard.
No, we're chuckling. We're having fun with it. But that is, I was talking to Mom about that, and she goes, it is different, isn't it? People are fascinated to hear the inside stories from you and Mike, people that have been in the business. About what goes on, and it is, and like you said, when you're watching on television, the viewer can see the action, so you're just kind of facilitating, going around the edges with it, and filling in the blanks, kind of. But whereas in basketball or any other sport, when you're the radio guy, you got to give every pass to the corner, back out, kick it back out. You're describing what's going on to the listener.
Yeah, you're painting the picture, and in TV, the picture's already provided, right? So
you summed it up a lot easier than I did.
Well, the other thing too is that in television, you got a lot of people in your ear. You got the graphics guy saying, "Okay, I'm putting up the recent stats," or you got the producer saying, "We're going to cut to this shot," and the director's got the center field camera going. So you got all these different things going on, all these moving pieces. Where in radio, it's just like plug in and go. So you do the broadcast. I do the games by myself. I don't have an analyst on the Spurs broadcast, and most of these college baseball games I'm doing by myself. So therefore, it's just like freewheeling. You just go ahead and do it. Whereas in TV, you have to be a little bit more organized because certain things are going to come into play. And for instance, there was like 18 graphics the other day, one for every half inning. And they put up trends, last 5 games. Coastal Carolina was averaging 12 runs a game or whatever it was. So you got to kind of work to the graphics and what the fans see. And not watch the game so much live, but actually watch the monitor a little bit more because different things will pop up on the screen you'll have to comment on.
I was going to say on TV. On TV, you don't have to describe the fleecy white clouds like you do on radio, right?
Well, over Dish-Falk Field, there are fleecy white clouds. That's obviously a reference to Bill Little, the longtime sports information director. And I did not come up with that line. There's a guy that David, pretty well, Doug Lindauer, who played center field for the University of Texas. And
he'll be in my box. He'll be in my suite on Saturday for the TCU game. Oh yeah, I know.
Okay, well, he is the guy to blame for fleecy white clouds. He came up with that line.
That's great. Who's done a pretty good transition, I think, or he kind of does. He still does equal amount as Craig Way. Because Craig does a lot of high school football TV telecast, does a TV show. He's great on the radio, and he's found the balance of how to handle both. He does a great job. Never heard of him.
Never heard of the guy. Don't know what I'm talking about. I just wish Craig would work a little more. I mean, come on. Gee whiz. What is he only doing? 7-8 games a week? He needs to pick up that workload.
Yeah, I mean, for the money they're paying him, I can't. He hardly does anything.
He only works about 350 games a year.
There's a story in the book, guys. I hate to keep going back to the book, but these stories are all in there about the NCAA tournament one year. I think it was the 94-95 season, and Craig was scheduled to work for CBS Radio in Boise State. Boise was not at Boise State, but Boise was hosting a regional. Texas was playing in the regional in Salt Lake City. So he was unable to book flights between Boise and Salt Lake. The Horns were going to play Thursday, Saturday. The tournament in Boise was going to be Saturday or Friday, Sunday. So instead of securing a flight, which you couldn't do, he just rented a car. It's 330 miles between Salt Lake and Boise. So he just went back and forth between the two cities, which is crazy.
Wow.
Because he was covering games. Yeah. So, for instance, Texas beat Oregon 90-73 in the first round Thursday night. We went out and had dinner with some network executives. He drops me off at the hotel. Then he takes off for Boise. I got a great night's sleep. I had some wine. I was great. I got up in the morning, turned the TV on, and I'm, still kind of waking up, and there's Craig courtside in Boise as they're doing a wraparound. I'm like, wait a minute, how did he do that? He must have gotten 2 hours sleep. Then he drives back to Salt Lake, does our game with Maryland, then drives back to Boise. So I said, Craig, did you drive the speed limit all that time? I mean, you drove 1,200 miles this weekend. How do you do it? He goes, oh, I employ the art of binocular driving. It's so flat in Utah, the northern parts of Utah, the soft flats. I drove with the binoculars in one hand and my hand on the wheel, and I was doing like 95, 100 because nobody was in distance. I couldn't see anybody. And if I saw anybody, they'd be 3 or 4 miles in the distance. I could slow down. But he was going over 100 miles an hour while binocular driving between Boise and Salt Lake.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's
you mentioned, I was going to say, you mentioned Ron Franklin earlier, and Ron Franklin was someone I tried to emulate in my younger years because he was a great sportscaster. Fred Hickman was another one. Was there anyone growing up on radio, any sportscasters, sports announcers that you tried to emulate, Bill?
Yeah. There was a guy, Mike, named Byram Sam, who ironically enough was a native Texan, had gone to TCU and spent his entire career in Philadelphia. He was the voice of the old Philadelphia A's before they moved to Kansas City in '54, and then he went over to the Phillies when the A's moved to Kansas City. And he was older by the time I was a kid and listening to him, but he had this real melodic kind of a sing-song play-by-play, and I just love listening to the guy. And I tried to maybe not emulate him, but I tried to understand his cadence for baseball because it was nice and laid back. And there was a guy named Bill Campbell who did the Sixers, and he was real up-tempo and intense, and I probably picked up a thing or two from him. But yeah, I wanted to do this for so long. I tried to develop my own style. My mom got me a Panasonic tape recorder when I was 10. She cashed in some S&H green stamps. You guys don't remember S&H green stamps, I'm sure. But that's what poor people did to try to cash in on stuff. Mom would save these green stamps. Yeah. So I got this Panasonic tape recorder, and I remember vividly turning down Tony Kubek and Kurt Gowdy and doing my own version of the Yankees-Red Sox games that weekend. So we all did that kind of stuff. I was play-by-play guys. So I try to develop my own style, even though I listen to a lot of guys and still learn from different people. I try to develop my own style at a young age.
Every sport's a little bit different when you're calling a game.
Yeah,
has there been one that's been tougher than the others?
Hockey was real tough. I only did the one. I did a couple of hockey games actually, but the game on KView, that was difficult because it was such a fast-moving sport. I know the sport, but the terminology is a little different. You got to get used to it. I think if I had done maybe a half a season or a season of hockey, I could have been pretty good at it, but that would have been a learning process. Football, you rely on your analyst, just like you do in baseball most of the time. Basketball is just, especially with the NBA, 24-second shot clock. I don't need an analyst. The action goes too fast. I got too much stuff going on. It'd be hard to squeeze an analyst in. But every sport is a little bit different. Football, I really like because you could set up the play, and if you got a good color analyst, and I had Craig all those years, it really made it a fun broadcast. And a good sideline guy, too.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I was going to follow up, and I was going to ask the same thing Mike did. The tempo is just totally different for baseball. And you've done so much of it now. You probably know, just slow down for baseball, speed up for basketball. I mean, and like you said, football somewhere in between. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And of course, football, you got a lot of action in a short period of time, and then you have no action for 30, then action, no action, where basketball is more a continual flow. And baseball is, baseball can be a challenge, though, David. I did a game the other day. UTSA was playing Charlotte, and the home plate umpire had one of these strike zones, okay? One of these minuscule strike zones. I like umpires with big strike zones. Come up swinging, guys. Let's go. We're going to be out of here in 2.5 hours. This guy had a postage stamp. So UTSA pitchers delivered 17 walks. There were 8 pitching changes. Charlotte started getting the same problem. Oh, yeah. So a 9-inning game became a 4-hour and 36-minute slugfest. Not a lot of fun. Too many walks, too many hit batters. But I love college baseball, but I sure would like to see home plate umpires maybe expand that zone a little bit,
You mentioned Keith Moreland earlier being one of your analysts through the years. You've worked with so many. We had Lance Blanks on the show a few weeks ago, and he talked about at one of the Spurs championships that end of the game, he jumps over the table and goes out and celebrates. Leaves you by yourself.
That's okay, because he was part of the organization at the time. He could do that, and he's a former player, and he has a better vertical leap than I do. I would have pulled a hamstring. But I learned a lot from Keith. It's funny because Keith always calls me his mentor because I brought him into the booth, 26 years ago, or whatever it was. But I learned a lot from him because he knows the game so well. And he can detect a changeup or a slider from a curveball. He just knows the pitches so well. So I learned a lot from him. And he might have learned the nuances of broadcasting from me, but I learned a lot from him in the game and the way he approaches it. He's such a laid-back, fun guy, and he's got a ton of stories. I told Keith that he needs to write a book too. But there are a couple of Keith Moreland stories in the book. I remember killing a rain delay one day in Ames, Iowa, because when you get in this business, one of the things you want to do is have a rain delay and a rain out in Ames, Iowa. It's one of the classic places. You always want to make sure that you've got a lot of things to do in Ames, not much to do. So we went to Van Meter, which is about an hour away. Why would you go to Van Meter, Iowa? Well, that's the hometown of Bob Feller, Hall of Fame pitcher. They called him Rapid Robert. He had a great fastball, and he served in the service during World War II. And they have a great little museum there in his hometown. At least they did back then. This would have been around 2000 or so. And we went to Van Meter, Iowa, and had a great time. And then on the way back to Ames, Keith and I both like to play the ponies on occasion, and we're listening to a rock station, and they said, it's opening night at Prairie Downs in Des Moines. The next right-hand turn, Keith, it was like, something out of one of those old-time movies, like he makes a right-hand turn, dirt's flying. We're on some farm to market road in the middle of Iowa. He goes, we're going to Des Moines. Come on, we're going to Prairie Downs. We're going to opening night, So we made it to post time. So that's all. But that's the cool stories, somewhere in the middle of Iowa on a farm to market road trying to find a racetrack. That's a Keith Moreland story.
But I tell you what, Keith does do an excellent job. And I think what Keith does is the person who hasn't spent their life in baseball, he's great at describing it. And then those of us who have played and experienced, we love following him too, because he is described, he has a unique gift to being able to talk to the person, again, who's been in the game forever, and then the average fan, and making them both understand. I mean, I think he does a great job.
That's a very good point, David. He's also very good at football because, of course, he got recruited to play football by Darrell Royal
here a year or two.
at
A
the
lot of people
University
don't
of
know
Texas.
that. Right.
And one of the stories in the book is a story that Keith told me when he was at UT. A young freshman from Tyler came in by the name of Earl Campbell. And early in maybe his first scrimmage, he ran off tackle. Keith was a monster back, kind of a hybrid linebacker, strong
like
safety.
Comes up to fill the gap. Type guy.
And, yeah, exactly. And Earl just runs right over him, cracks his helmet. And I think it was after that practice that he went up to Coach Royal and said, I'm going to go across the street and play baseball because I don't want to tackle this guy. And I don't want to tackle this guy in practice every day for the next 2 years. So he made the right choice.
Yeah, he did, but he was actually a pretty good football player too. I mean, he probably did make that choice, and baseball was taking off for him. But he was a good football player too, really was.
Well, he led them to the '75 national championship, as you know, David, and of course, for a long time had the record for the most hits in the College World Series. I remember we were covering the College World Series. I had the media guide out, and he was driving, and we were driving back to the hotel, and I'm looking through the media guide. I said, "Hey, Zonk, who has the record for the most hits in the history of the College World Series?" He said, "Well, that would be me." And you're right, it is. That's it. Yeah, that's you.
He knew.
Yep.
Bill, looking at those jerseys behind you, you've broadcast more than 2,000 straight Spurs games. Amazing record that you have there. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. A lot of luck. The good Lord helped me out. I did one game in Salt Lake City. I had no business being on the air. I tried all kinds of stuff to loosen up my throat, and I just barely got through that game. And I probably shouldn't have been on the air that night, but that was back in 2017. So that was as close as I got to not making the streak complete. But I wanted to make sure I got that game in. Because I did not want the streak to end. But I got an email from a friend of mine after the game saying that I sounded like Kermit the Frog after Kermit smoked a pack of Pall Mall cigarettes. So I guess I didn't sound very good that night.
That's Lou Gehrig territory. 2,000 games. That's amazing. And I think was it Ginobili? So somebody was getting inducted to the Hall of Fame. And they pointed you out. Which player was that?
Yeah, that was last Saturday. Manu was taking the podium, and I hadn't seen him because of COVID. And I was close to Manu when he was playing. I covered all 16 years of his career, and he looked at the audience out there that the media gathered, and he saw some familiar faces, and then he saw me. And he congratulated me on my 2,000 straight games. And I thought that was great. But, that day was about him. It wasn't about me. But that's typical Manu. That's the way he is. He's always been a selfless person. He's been very cooperative with the media, very friendly to the fans. He realizes his importance in Argentina basketball history. He's a national hero and an icon down there, but he's still very popular in San Antonio, and he's made San Antonio his home after his career. And he's still part of the organization. He helps out the young guys. He's learning a little bit different things in the front office to do, but a very interesting guy, fluent in 3 languages, Italian, English, and Spanish. And one of my favorite guys to cover. One of the highlights of my career, guys, is covering Manu Ginobili for 16 seasons. And this is his Argentina jersey, of course. He led them to the gold medal in 2004, did Manu. Yeah.
Did he play with them in the 2008 Olympics? I was actually in Beijing for those. I did not go to the basketball. It was impossible to get a ticket, but I spent a lot of time over at baseball, track and field, and that kind of thing. But was he on the 2008 Olympic team also?
Yes, he was. Yeah, that was a good team, and they had very good success in a lot of the FIBA competitions, the international competition. So they were very good for a long time. It wasn't just Manu. They had other guys in that team like Luis Scola, Fabrizio Alberto, Pablo Prigioni, one of Mike Barnes' favorite players, Pablo Prigioni. We used to get guys. We had a guy named Nico Laprovitola. I am not kidding you. And he first came to us, and it was a preseason game, and I didn't get a pronunciation guide on him. And he was at the end of the bench, and he comes in late. And I asked our PR guy, I said, is it La Pravatola? He goes, yeah, La Pravatola. Well, Manu wasn't at that game. It was a preseason game. He was listening on the radio. There was no TV. So when I got back to San Antonio, Manu goes, Billy. It's not La Pravatola. It's La Pravitola. Okay, La Pravitola, which is not real easy to say. So anyway, for the next, 2-3 weeks, every time Manu saw me, La Pravitola. Okay, Manu, I got it. It's La Pravitola. I got it. So anyway, we have fun with that. And of course, we had so many international players come through. I mentioned this in the book too. We've had Manu and Beno and Hito and, Demo. We've had all these guys from foreign countries, Nando, Boris Diaw. Real quick Boris Diaw story. I don't know if you guys know Boris, but he was from France, and Boris played a long time in the NBA, but Boris is very laid back, and he was 2 minutes late for warm-up one time, and Chad Forcier was an assistant coach for us at the time, and he goes, here comes Boris 2 minutes late, and he says, Boris, you're supposed to be out here with 60 on the clock. It's 58 on the clock. You're 2 minutes late again. He goes, but coach, I told you I am French. So I guess if you're French, you can get away with whatever, right? So I asked Boris after that. I said, Boris, what's the deal? You're 2 minutes late. Is that a good excuse to say you're French? He goes, Billy, it's a great excuse because you tell people you're French, they know you do not care. Yeah. So you might be 2 minutes late. You might be 5. You might not show up. It's okay. You're French. So, okay, what a great way to go through life. Great. Just be a French.
That's great. Hey, talk a little bit about your music, and because you have kind of a second career or hobby. I don't know how you look at like Bo Jackson or not, but your music, you touched on it a while ago, doing the music for the prison ministry stuff. You've done some of that. Tell us about your music, and if you maybe wanted to go that direction instead of radio, and how that's evolved and meshed up with radio.
Believe me, David, it's not a second career. It is a hobby. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. If it was a second career, there'd be money involved instead of being money put into it. But I enjoy it. When I moved to Austin, I followed the rules, and that is pick up a guitar. You got to get a guitar when you move to Austin. But I just started strumming around a little bit. I took some lessons, and I started forming some melodies. The first song I ever wrote was inspired by a UT basketball poster with Chris Clack flying through the air. Mike, I don't know if you remember this, but it was called Why Drive When You Can Fly? And it was Chris Clack, who could really jump, flying through an outdoor court, those old Clark courts, David, over at UT. And the sun was setting. Yeah. I'm not sure if Susan Sigmund did that poster or not, but it was a beautiful poster. And it just said, Why Drive When You Can Fly? And I said, that's a great title for a song. So I wrote my first song, GC, little A minor thing, E minor thing. And so anyway, that started me. And now I've written probably 28 songs. And what I do is I write melodies and lyrics, and then I go to my musician friends who are better musicians than me. Nick Whitworth is a piano player and a producer. Mike Vasquez is a master guitar player. So I have those guys kind of help me out figuring out the chords and the instrumentation. And then we go in the studio and record these things. And we've had a lot of fun with it, And like I said, it's just a hobby, but it's something that I like to do to kind of, explore my creative side, if you will.
How many more songs? How many more books are in the future?
Wow. I don't know. I'm writing a song right now about my mom. In fact, I just got finished it, so I got to go in the studio here the next couple of weeks and record it. But I don't know. I really enjoyed working on this book. It was a labor of love. But I think that maybe once this whole basketball thing is over. I don't know how long I'm going to go with the play-by-play, but I might have another book in me. We'll see. But I just enjoy doing this. Travel is the other thing that I like doing, guys. So one of the things that the Spurs have afforded me to do, giving me the entire summer off, is the travel. So I've now been to all 50 states. My wife Jerry and I really like to hike. So we've been to the national parks. We've been to 25 of them now. We're going to go hit 3 more this summer. And growing up in inner city Philadelphia, I've got a real appreciation for outdoors because I didn't grow up in a real, beautiful area as far as mountains and rivers and all that is concerned. I grew up in the city. So getting a chance to go out to Montana and Wyoming and places like that, far west Texas. There's so many beautiful places in this country. A lot of places I still want to see. And Europe too. I want to get over to Europe and travel a little bit more, but that'll probably have to wait until after all this stuff settles down over there. But if you ever get a chance, I don't know if you guys have ever been in Montana or Wyoming or any of the national parks, but it's just exhilarating. And for me, it really is kind of almost a spiritual moment because you realize how fortunate we are to live in this country.
That's cool. By the way, I wanted to make a comment on the cover of the book. Your hair looks good too. Not only the mustache, but look at the hair. I want all the viewers.
Yeah.
That's big time hair right there. Now,
I did not bring in David. David, I did not bring in a makeup artist. I did not have a hairdresser for this. Mike Barnes, of course, an old TV guy. He's used to all that pampering. He's used to the people. He gets a pre-sportscast massage from Inga, the Swedish masseuse. I never had that. In radio, we don't have that kind of stuff. So what you see is what you get.
And at least you didn't have to take a selfie.
Now, try doing this because a lot of people might not know this. A lot will. They're fans of Mike, but he's married to Kim Barnes, who is a co-anchor woman with him. So now they go, hey, Mike and I decided to do this, so they're going to coach me up, and they've actually done a really good job on little things. But I've got Kim on going, David, get a pillow, get a pillow for your back. David, look into the camera. I mean, I'm sitting here like this, like talk about tense. It was a lot easier hitting the baseball. I mean, this is kind of. I've got 2 of them going, hey, dude, get a light for your face. I can't do much for the face. Okay, I mean, that's all I got. So it's pretty funny. They are pampered.
We're tough coaches.
They are coaches.
But your cap looks good, David. The cap looks real good. Okay.
Save Muni right here. We're going to have Charlie Crenshaw on Friday. Or
nice.
Charlie on this week. Yeah. Talk a little Masters.
Yeah. Ed Clements goes out there every year with Ben. So I was kidding with you guys earlier about maybe getting Ed on. There's an Ed Clements story there.
Got to hear an Ed story. Come on.
All right, man. There's so many of them. But one of my favorites is we were doing a game and Rice had a third baseman named Antonio DiGesualdo. And Ed was having a hard time with DiGesualdo. So about 3 or 4 times before the game, he said, hey, Billy, how you say that? I said, DiGesualdo. Okay. Well, sure enough, Ed's got the 4th inning of play-by-play. He's doing the middle 3. And here comes the third baseman, and the name comes out, DiGesualdo. So Ed starts laughing. And he realizes he missed.
Of course he does. Of course he does.
So his face starts turning red, and it's his inning to do play-by-play. I'm not going to bail him out. He's on this island alone. So I just kind of looked off to the side, and he says it again. He goes, again, the third baseman, DiGesualdo. Oh, he starts laughing. I'm like, I almost had to walk out of the booth. I'm just going to let him go. So for the rest of the game, the third baseman was known simply as Antonio. He didn't even try it after that. So,
way to go, Ed.
Yeah, way to go, Ed.
That's great.
But I tell you, one of the deals, kind of the inspiration when Barnes and I were kicking all this around a couple of years ago, is they had Vern Lundquist on a podcast. They do the 15th Club or whatever they've been doing, and Ed was involved, and they had a round table, and it was really cool to listen to the Vern Lundquist stories. Any stories like that? I know we've touched on some, but any of other announcers or anything like that come to mind that are in the book?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had a chance to work with so many different people through the years. And I just read Vern's book, by the way. It's been out for a while, but I got some inspiration from reading some of these other play-by-play books. Guys like Bill Mercer, who was at North Texas. Mike Capps just wrote a book, the guy that's for the Round Rock Express. I've been talking to Mike, and he's been recording his audio book. So that's one of the highlights. Sean Elliott is a guy that I've had a chance to work with. Of course, he's the television analyst for the Spurs. His number hangs up in the rafters. And Sean is a guy that I've had a chance to travel with quite a bit. And just working with all these guys and just having a chance to kind of hang out with them after the game and have a glass of wine and learn this and learn that about these guys. It's been so much fun, and it's been a very rewarding experience because I mentioned PJ Carlissimo earlier. Yeah, I knew PJ, or at least was familiar with him from the time I was really kind of a young guy. And then the chance to experience and get a relationship with him. Dick Stockton is another guy who I admired for a long time. And Dick was kind of a pinch hitter for us on the TV side for 2 or 3 years. And he traveled with us. And for some reason, Dick took a liking to me and invited me to a bunch of dinners and a bunch of lunches. And Dick had a bunch of stories about Howard Cosell and Kurt Gowdy and guys that he had worked with that I had already looked up to. So, yeah, some of those stories in the book, too. So just a lot of different, anecdotes and recollections of different things that happened. And some of them are quite humorous, especially the smaller market stories where, you have to wear multiple hats and different things happen. You have technical issues and you get through them the best you can.
It's Stockton, sorry, Mike. Stockton's got a little Mike. Ken Barnes, he met his wife.
That's right.
In Game 6 of the 1975 World Series, the great where Fisk hit the home run and was waving it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
Leslie Visser, you did not know that. If you see him next time, I think they've since just recently, split up.
But Leslie Visser, there's a Leslie Visser story in the book. There you go. All right, so the Horns were playing in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Leslie came over. She was a sideline reporter for CBS and said, I always understood that the play-by-play guys always have little anecdotes, little stories that I might be able to help fill my broadcast. So, Bill, can you tell me a couple little stories? And I think I told her that Dexter Cambridge was taking a ballet class to help on his footwork or something. So anyway, I said, but look, I'm doing my talk show courtside tonight. Can you come by and maybe spend a few minutes with it? She goes, sure. So she came by, and I wasn't sure if she was coming by or not. I did not promote the fact that she was coming on. So it was during a commercial break. She puts the headphones on, and Kent Cohen, I don't know if you guys know Kent, but he's been around for a long time. He was a producer for me back at KLBJ. This is back in the early 90s. And I said, hey, Kent, do you know Leslie Visser from CBS? He had no idea she had the headphones on, right? He goes, oh, she's hot, man. Oh, I like her. I like Leslie Visser. I like her. And without skipping a beat, Leslie goes, oh, hi, Kent. He goes, oh, hi, Leslie. Hi, Leslie. So I never pictured somebody blushing from 1,300 miles away like I did that night. So now every time I see Leslie, and I've seen her multiple times, I go, oh, hi, Leslie. She gets a big kick out of that. And of course, I've never
that could have been Ed Clements too. That could have been Clements too. Yeah, that could have been Ed.
If it was Ed Clements, he probably would have said something a little bit more offensive, I'm sure.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
That's classic. All right, Bill, tell us one more time. Where can we find the book?
The best way is probably Amazon. You can order it $15. There's also a Kindle offer for $9 if you'd like to read it off your computer. It's an easy read, guys. I try to go in a real chronological order, throw some anecdotes in, and I throw about 13 songs in there. Of course, you can't hear the songs, but we do have an audiobook coming out in about a month or so where I'll include the songs so you can actually listen to them and hear me tell these stories. But it's been a fun project. I'm really pleasantly surprised at how well it's done. A lot of people have picked it up already, and I've got a lot of people sending me pictures of them with the book. I don't know if they'll ever crack open the book, but they got the book and they're reading, they're taking pictures with it. So maybe one day they'll kind of crack it open and read a story or two. So, but several people have told me they've enjoyed it. They like the stories. So I try to keep the story short. Obviously the longest story in the book is about Craig Way because it's impossible to keep a Craig Way story short, as you guys know. And he's also the only person who could be in two places at one time. I tried that. I couldn't do it. But Craig can do it. But anyway, we've had fun with it. And I appreciate you giving me a chance to plug it a little bit.
Well, we appreciate having you on. Great stories. We look forward to book number 2 coming out before we know it.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Good to be with you guys. David, good to see you.
Good to see you, Bill. One more question. Do you make 3,000?
No, he says emphatically. 3,000 would require about 12 more seasons?
Yeah.
And I think I may be hiking in Yellowstone National Park when they try to find me for the 3,000th game. I might be doing something else at that point. But we'll see how far we can go. I want to keep going for a little while anyway. I'm still feeling great, thank God. I'm 63 years of age, just about to finish up my 21st season. So we'll see how long it goes. But I don't think I'm going to catch Chick Hearn. His record is 3,388. He didn't miss a game from 1965 to 2001. Wow. So I'll let Chick have that record.
Oh, You're amazing at what you do, Bill. Thank you so much. We appreciate having you here in the box seats with us.
Thanks very much, guys. Good to be with you.
Thank you, Bill. That was great.